She texted me, "Surprise anniversary dinner at 8, come quick." I walked in and saw her holding hands with her ex. She smirked. "It's not working out," I calmly said. "You're right." Then I bought them the $5,000 celebration wine as a thoughtful gift. Her frantic 40 missed calls later. This happened 3 days ago and I'm honestly still processing it. Writing this out helps me make sense of what went down because it was absolutely unhinged even by my ex's standards. Some context. I'm 29, work in pharmaceutical sales, and pull decent money. Not rich, but comfortable enough to spoil someone if they're worth it. Been dating Megan for 2.5 years. Met through mutual friends at a rooftop party downtown. She's 26, works in marketing for some wellness brand, all organic everything. Posts inspirational quotes on LinkedIn. You know the type. Megan's what most people would call a catch. Objectively attractive, college educated, has her own apartment and pays her own bills. Socially connected with a big friend group. On paper, everything looked good. But there were always these little things that bothered me. How she'd order the most expensive items on menus, then barely touch them. How she'd suggest activities, then expect me to plan and pay for everything. How she treated service workers like they were invisible unless she needed something. Nothing major enough to end things over, but enough to make me wonder sometimes if we were really compatible long term. The biggest red flag should have been how she talked about her ex Trevor. They dated for 3 years through college and a year after graduation. Broke up about 4 months before we met. According to Megan, he was immature and couldn't handle a real relationship. Too focused on his startup, didn't prioritize her emotional needs, standard breakup narrative. But she brought him up constantly. Trevor always said this. Trevor never would have done that. Trevor had better taste in restaurants. Trevor was more adventurous in bed. It was like being in a relationship with someone who was constantly comparing me to their previous boyfriend. I addressed it early on, told her it was weird how often his name came up in conversation. She got defensive and said I was being insecure, that they were ancient history and I needed to trust her, that bringing up past relationships was normal and healthy. So I dropped it because I didn't want to be that jealous boyfriend. But the Trevor references never stopped. If anything, they got more frequent as time went on. The really annoying part was how she'd frame these comparisons as compliments. "Oh, Trevor never bought me flowers, but you're so thoughtful." Trevor never remembered important dates, but you always do. Like she was doing me a favor by telling me how much better I was than her ex, except it never felt like she actually believed I was better. More like she was settling for me because Trevor hadn't worked out. About 6 months ago, I started noticing changes in her behavior. She was on her phone more during dates, getting texts at weird hours that she'd quickly dismiss, taking calls in the other room. When I'd ask who was calling, she'd give vague answers about work or family stuff. Then there were the mysterious plans. Suddenly, Megan had all these obligations that came up last minute. Book club meetings that ran late, yoga classes that got extended, coffee dates with girlfriends that turned into all-day affairs, always with apologies about the timing, but somehow I was constantly getting bumped for other priorities. I'm not a paranoid person, but the pattern was obvious. Something was going on, and she was being dishonest about it. The confirmation came about 2 months ago when we were at a bar downtown. Megan went to the bathroom and left her phone on the table. It buzzed with a text notification, and I glanced over automatically. Trevor's name on the screen. Message preview saying, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Miss you." When Megan came back, I asked her about it. Said I couldn't help but notice she'd gotten a text from Trevor, and it seemed kind of personal. She immediately got defensive and accused me of snooping through her phone. Said I was violating her privacy and being controlling. I pointed out that the message had popped up on her lock screen while she was gone. I wasn't going through anything. She softened a bit and admitted they'd reconnected recently, just as friends. Catching up on old times. Nothing romantic. I asked why she hadn't mentioned they were talking again. She said she didn't think it was important, that I'd probably just get jealous for no reason like I was doing right now. That she should be able to maintain friendships with people from her past without having to clear it with me first. Technically, she was right. People can be friends with their exes, but the secretive behavior and defensive reaction suggested this was more than casual friendship. I told her I wasn't comfortable with her hiding contact with Trevor from me. That if they were really just friends, she shouldn't have any problem being transparent about their conversations. She said she'd be more open about it going forward. But nothing changed. If anything, she got better at hiding it. She'd wait until I was in the shower to take calls. She'd text while I was watching TV next to her but angle the phone away from me. She'd make plans with vague references to meeting friends, but never specify who or where. The final straw came 2 weeks ago. Megan had been acting weird all day, distracted during our usual Sunday brunch, checking her phone constantly, giving short answers to questions. When I asked what was wrong, she said she was just tired from a busy week at work. That afternoon, she said she needed to run errands and would be back in a few hours. Standard stuff. Grocery store, dry cleaners, nothing unusual, except she was gone for almost 5 hours with nothing to show for it. No groceries. No dry cleaning. When I asked what had taken so long, she got snippy and said traffic was terrible and everything took longer than expected. That night, I found a receipt in her purse while looking for gum. Dinner for 2 at this upscale restaurant downtown. Expensive wine, appetizers and entrees. Total bill over $300. All charged to her credit card that same afternoon. When I confronted her about it, she tried to play it off as a business dinner with a client. Said it was last minute and she'd forgotten to mention it. But her company doesn't do client dinners at restaurants that cost $300 for 2 people. Plus, she'd told me she was running errands, not having work meetings. I pressed her on the details and she started getting defensive again. Said I was being paranoid and controlling. That she didn't have to account for every minute of her day. That I needed to trust her or this relationship wasn't going to work. That's when I knew for sure she was cheating. The defensive responses, the obvious lies, the expensive dinner she couldn't explain. All the classic signs were there. But I didn't want to break up based on suspicions. I wanted proof. So I started paying closer attention to her patterns and behavior. The evidence wasn't hard to find once I started looking. Charges on her credit card for hotels during the day. Uber rides to parts of town she had no reason to visit. Photos on her Instagram, at restaurants and events with carefully cropped images that didn't show who she was with. Most telling were the lies about her schedule. Megan would tell me she had plans with specific friends, then I'd see those same friends posting on social media about completely different activities at the same times. She was creating cover stories for time she was spending elsewhere. I could have confronted her with this evidence, but something about the whole situation bothered me. The calculated deception, the elaborate lies, the way she'd turned it around on me whenever I questioned her behavior. It felt like she was enjoying the manipulation. That's when I decided to let her show me exactly who she really was before ending things. Our 2.5-year anniversary was tomorrow. We'd talked about doing something special. Maybe a weekend trip or a nice dinner at one of those restaurants that require reservations months in advance. Megan had been dropping hints about wanting something memorable. 3 days ago, she sent me that text. Surprise anniversary dinner at 8. Come quick. With the address of Romano's, which is this trendy Italian place downtown that's impossible to get into without connections. I was actually excited for a minute. Maybe I'd been wrong about the cheating. Maybe she'd planned something special to reconnect and work on our relationship. Maybe the weird behavior had been her trying to plan a surprise. I got to Romano's about 10 minutes early and asked for Megan's reservation. The hostess looked confused and said there was no reservation under that name. But she could seat me at the bar while I waited if I wanted. I ordered a drink and kept watching the door for Megan to arrive. That's when I saw them walk in together. Megan and Trevor holding hands and laughing like they were on a romantic date. She was wearing this dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. He had his arm around her waist like they owned the place. I watched Trevor approach the hostess and give a different name. They got seated immediately at a corner table. Prime location with candles and flowers already set up. Clearly a reservation Trevor had made under his own name. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds processing what I was seeing. My girlfriend of 2.5 years was on what looked like an anniversary dinner with her ex-boyfriend, using our actual anniversary as the date for her romantic evening with someone else. The audacity was breathtaking. I watched them for a few more minutes from across the restaurant. They were all over each other, sharing food, touching hands across the table, whispering and giggling like teenagers. Zero awareness that anyone else existed in the room. That's when I decided to introduce myself. I walked over to their table and said hello. Megan's face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, panic, calculation. Then this weird smug expression like she'd been expecting this moment. Trevor looked confused at first, then recognition dawned on him. He'd never met me in person, but obviously knew who I was. "Oh," Megan said with this fake surprised tone. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." I looked at her, then at Trevor, then back at her. "Really? Because you texted me to meet you here at 8 for our anniversary dinner." She had the grace to look uncomfortable for about half a second before that smug expression came back. "Right, about that." She reached across the table and took Trevor's hand. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about what I really want in a relationship, and honestly, it's not working out." Just like that. 2.5 years ended with, "It's not working out." While she held hands with her ex-boyfriend at a restaurant she'd lured me to under false pretenses. Trevor looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but Megan seemed to be enjoying herself. Like this was some kind of power play she'd been planning. "You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "It's not working out." I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Started typing while they both watched me with confused expressions. "I'm just making a list of everything I need to cancel," I said conversationally. "The weekend trip to Napa I booked for next month, the concert tickets I bought for your favorite band, the reservation at that Michelin-starred place you've been wanting to try." Megan's smug expression started faltering as she realized how much money I'd spent planning things for our future. "Oh, and I should probably return this," I said, pulling a small velvet box out of my jacket pocket. "Was planning to give it to you next week, but obviously the timing isn't right anymore." Trevor's eyes went wide when he saw the ring box. Megan looked like she'd been slapped. "You were going to propose?" she whispered. Keywords being, "we're going to." I said, putting the box back in my pocket. "But you're right, this isn't working out. Actually, you've done me a huge favor by showing me who you really are before I made an even bigger mistake." I signaled to their waiter, who came over immediately. Professional smile and everything. "Excuse me," I said. "I'd like to order a bottle of wine for this table, something special to celebrate their reunion." The waiter looked pleased. "Of course, sir. What did you have in mind?" "Your best bottle of Bordeaux. Price is no object. This is a very special occasion." The waiter's eyes lit up. "We have a 1982 Chateau Latour that's quite exceptional. It's $5,000, but absolutely worth it for a celebration of this magnitude." "Perfect," I said, pulling out my credit card. "Please charge it to this card and deliver it with the full presentation. Let them know it's a gift to commemorate their reunion." Megan started to protest, but I held up my hand. No, I insist. You deserve to celebrate properly, both of you." I turned back to the waiter. "Also, please let the sommelier know that this wine is to commemorate the end of my relationship with this woman and the beginning of theirs. I'm sure he'll want to make sure they get the full presentation." The waiter looked confused but nodded. "Of course, sir. Very thoughtful of you." I looked back at Megan and Trevor, who were both staring at me like I'd lost my mind. "Well, I should let you two enjoy your evening," I said. "Congratulations on finding each other again. I hope you'll be very happy together." I walked away before either of them could respond, paid for my drink at the bar, and left the restaurant. The whole encounter took maybe 10 minutes, but I felt like I'd been there for hours. The adrenaline was incredible. I'd never done anything that calculated before, but it felt amazing. My phone started ringing before I even got to my car. Megan's name on the screen. I sent it to voicemail and kept walking. By the time I got home, 20 minutes later, I had 8 missed calls and a dozen text messages, all from Megan. All increasingly frantic. The messages started with damage control. That wasn't what it looked like. Let me explain. You're overreacting. Then they shifted to panic. Please call me back. We need to talk. I made a mistake. Finally, they turned into anger. You're being childish. That wine stunt was ridiculous. I can't believe you're acting like this. I ignored all of them and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to 27 more missed calls and about 40 text messages. The progression was fascinating to read. Apparently, the wine had arrived during their dinner with full ceremony. The sommelier had given them the whole presentation about the vintage and significance, had explained that it was a gift from me to celebrate their new relationship. Trevor had been confused about why I would spend $5,000 on wine for them. Megan had tried to play it off as a generous gesture, but Trevor wasn't buying it. He'd realized the whole situation was more complicated than she'd made it seem. The restaurant bill was still substantial, even without the wine. Expensive entrees and other drinks they'd ordered throughout the evening. Trevor had expected Megan to cover her share, but she'd apparently assumed he would pay for everything. When her credit card was declined for her portion, he'd gotten annoyed about the assumption. Said he wasn't interested in being part of whatever drama she had going on with me. Had paid his own portion and left her to figure out the rest. She'd tried to convince the restaurant to comp her meal given the circumstances, but they weren't having it. She'd had to call her dad to transfer money just to cover her portion of the bill. The whole evening had been a disaster. The best part was how she tried to spin it as my fault. How I'd ruined what should have been a special moment for her and Trevor. How my reaction was proof that I never really loved her. How a mature person would have just walked away instead of making a scene. The lack of self-awareness was incredible. She'd lured me to a restaurant under false pretenses to break up with me in front of her ex-boyfriend, and somehow I was the one who'd made a scene. I finally responded to her messages around noon. Single text. You're right, it wasn't working out. Good luck with Trevor. Then I blocked her number and all her social media accounts. But the story doesn't end there because Megan wasn't done yet. Yesterday I got a call from her friend Ashley, who I'd met a few times at parties. Apparently, Megan had been calling everyone we knew, trying to get them to convince me to talk to her. According to Ashley, the situation with Trevor had imploded immediately after the restaurant incident. He'd accused her of using him to make me jealous. Said he wasn't interested in being part of her drama. Had blocked her number and gone back to whatever he was doing before they reconnected. So now Megan was single and had been humiliated at the restaurant. Her dad was annoyed about having to bail her out when she couldn't cover her own dinner bill. Her friends were getting tired of listening to her complain about the situation. Ashley said Megan was convinced that I'd planned the whole thing as some elaborate revenge scheme. That I'd somehow known about her dinner with Trevor and set up the wine order to embarrass them both. I told Ashley that was giving me way too much credit for strategic thinking. That I'd simply walked into what I thought was our anniversary dinner and found my girlfriend on a date with someone else. The wine order was just a spontaneous decision to mark the occasion appropriately. Ashley laughed and said she'd figured it was something like that. That Megan had always been dramatic and was probably rewriting history to make herself look less awful. She also mentioned that word was getting around our friend group about what had happened. That most people weren't surprised given how Megan had been acting lately. That several people had suspected she was seeing someone else but hadn't wanted to get involved. Apparently I hadn't been as oblivious as I thought. Other people had noticed her behavior too. This morning I got a text from an unknown number. Megan had gotten a new phone or was using someone else's. Same basic message as before. She'd made a mistake. Trevor had manipulated her. She wanted to work things out. I didn't respond. Just blocked the new number and went on with my day. The whole experience has been weirdly liberating. For months I'd been questioning my own perceptions and making excuses for Megan's behavior, wondering if I was being paranoid or controlling, second-guessing myself constantly. Now I have definitive proof that my instincts were correct. She was cheating. She was lying. She was manipulating the situation to make me feel crazy for noticing obvious red flags. The anniversary dinner ambush was probably her way of ending things on her terms while making me look like the bad guy. Show up with Trevor to demonstrate that she'd moved on. Break up with me in public so I couldn't make a scene. Walk away looking like the victim of my unreasonable reaction. Except it backfired spectacularly because I didn't react the way she expected. Most guys would have either gotten angry and made a scene or slunk away humiliated. She was probably counting on one of those responses so she could paint me as either abusive or pathetic to justify her behavior. Instead, I stayed calm and found a creative way to mark the occasion that left them both dealing with consequences. The wine order was expensive enough to be memorable, but not illegal or abusive. Just a thoughtful gesture taken to an extreme that reflected the absurdity of the situation. I've been thinking about what made me handle it that way, instead of getting emotional. I think it was the sheer audacity of her approach. Using our anniversary date to break up with me for someone else was so over the top that it almost seemed like performance art. It deserved an equally theatrical response. The $5,000 wine was perfect because it forced them to deal with the immediate practical consequences of their choices, while I walked away clean. They couldn't even complain about it without admitting how awful their behavior had been. Plus, it gave me a great story to tell for years to come. Much better than the standard "my girlfriend cheated and we broke up" narrative. I've learned some valuable lessons from this whole situation. Trust your instincts when someone's behavior doesn't match their words. Don't make excuses for people who lie to your face, and sometimes the best response to someone's bad behavior is to let them experience the natural consequences of their choices. Megan wanted to trade up from me to Trevor. She got her wish. The fact that Trevor wasn't actually interested in a serious relationship with her was information she could have discovered before blowing up our relationship. But she was too focused on the excitement of cheating to think through the practical implications. Now she gets to live with those consequences while I move on to someone who actually values honesty and respect in a relationship. I'm planning to return the engagement ring next week. The jeweler has a 30-day return policy, so I have time to process everything first. That money will go toward a nice vacation somewhere warm where I can reset and figure out what I want next. Maybe I'll send Megan a postcard from whatever beach I end up on. Nothing mean or spiteful. Just a friendly update on how well things are going since she helped me realize our relationship wasn't working out. Actually, no, that would be petty. Better to just move on and let her wonder how I'm doing while she deals with Trevor's rejection and the embarrassment. Sometimes the best revenge is living well and letting other people deal with the mess they created for themselves. The $5,000 wine was just a small gesture to help them celebrate properly. Very thoughtful of me, really, when you think about it. Even paid for it myself, so they wouldn't have to worry about the cost. After all, she was right. It wasn't working out. I was just being supportive of her decision to move on. Can't say I didn't handle the breakup like a gentleman.